In this video, we are going to go over triangle congruence statements. So in this first part, we're going to look at two examples where you need to state how you know the triangles are congruent. So that's including things like side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, and hypotenuse, leg. So these are our choices that we are going to be looking at. So at this point, this should be review. The next part is if there is a missing congruence mark, draw that in and identify why you can draw that in. So for the first one, I'm looking at two triangles. What we can see here is I have a side and an angle. So I know there's a side and an angle being involved in this one. Now I need a third piece of information. We always need three pieces of information. Always. So when I'm looking for three pieces of information, I got to determine what else maybe isn't marked. And from here, I can see that if this is a bow tie shape, there's going to be vertical angles happening here. So I'm going to mark my missing ones that are right here. And then I'm going to say why. So I know that these are congruent because they are vertical angles. So now if I'm going to come here and I'm going to decide how I know these triangles are congruent, I have an angle next to an angle next to a side. So we have angle, angle, side. So keep in mind when you are identifying, again, if I have this empty space right here, if I went this direction, I would have angle next to an angle next to a side. The other way, I would have side, angle, angle. And if you go the other direction, you should be able to still identify that it's one of these ones listed here. So our next example is over here. So first thing I need to note is I've got 90-degree angles right here. Those 90-degree angles right here are going to tell me that I'm dealing with a right triangle. So I'm just taking a note because I want to remind you guys that if I see a right triangle, there is likely a good indication here that we're going to end up with something dealing with hypotenuse, leg. Not always, but generally. So I have one leg identified. They share a side, and they share this long side right here, which is their hypotenuse, which I can mark. So identifying why I can mark this, that's the first thing, right? I can say that this is same side. So both triangles share the same side. So now I can notice, okay, this is a right triangle. So that's one piece of information I know. A second piece of information I know is that there's two legs that are congruent and their hypotenuse is congruent. So I can say that this is hypotenuse, leg. All right, now to look at the next two examples. So given that the pair of triangles are congruent, write a congruence statement of the missing congruence mark. So remember, we're trying to find a mark that we're missing in this, and I want to identify it and be able to write a statement for it. Then I want to make sure that I can write out what the triangle congruences are themselves. So I'm going to write out the triangle name is congruent to the other triangle name. So we're practicing writing the congruent statements itself. So previously, these are more of what we call the postulates that we use, or how we prove, how we conclude that they're the same. This is just me practicing writing out the corresponding parts of it. So for this one, I need to have it so that these are side, angle, side. I'm given that I have two sides marked, so I need an angle in the middle. That's what's sandwiched here. That's what I'm missing. So I'm going to make a mark where I would have that angle. So we're looking at here, and we're looking at here. So that means that the first thing I'm going to do is write that this angle is congruent to this angle. So In this case, because these aren't attached to anything or to each other, I can just write it as angle C is congruent to angle Y. And then I want to also write that this triangle is congruent to this triangle. I have to do it in a corresponding way, right? So if I write triangle BCD is congruent to triangle, I need to first find what is the same as B. So looking at the position, it's next to this two mark right here. Z is next to the 2 mark here. So Z is going to correspond to B. Then for C, we know that Y corresponds to it based on this marking right here. So Z and then Y. And then lastly, D must correspond to X as it's next to this 1 mark right here. So that's our triangle congruent statement. And this is our angle congruent statement that we need in order to satisfy that this is side, angle, side. The next one I'm going to look at is angle, side, angle. So I'm given that this angle and this angle are the same. We're actually missing a couple marks right here. So I have this one because it's same side, since the triangles are sharing a side. And I'm also missing something else, right? So I have angle side, and then I need angle here also. So now I have angle, side, angle. So I'm actually going to write both that I'm missing. So I know that for my same side, I have JI is congruent to JI. And I also need to say that this angle right here is the same as this angle right here. So notice how this is different from this one. I have to describe this angle using 3 letters instead of 1. The reason is if I just said angle I, then this whole thing is angle I. I actually see a bunch of different angle I's. Is it this entire angle? Is it this one? Is it this one? Which one is it? So I need to be very specific. The way I like to think about this is how would I draw this angle in? So how would I draw this angle in is I would say KIJ. So KIJ angle KIJ is congruent to angle. And notice that the one that I'm talking about, is what's in the center. That's going to help us. So now I need to do it for the same thing for this one. So I want to make it so that they correspond. I know K corresponds to E, so I need to start with E. And then because J is now in the center, I'm going to go E, J, I. So E, J, I. And then lastly, I'm going to state that this triangle is congruent to this triangle. Again, the order matters. So triangle EJI is congruent to KIJ. Notice the markings have to match up. KIJ. Just because the letters match up here doesn't mean that the angles do when we're drawing it. So we can't just simply write KJI, EJI. Those angles aren't the same. They aren't corresponding. We have to make sure that the corresponding parts are lined up. So KIJ, EJI.